You is back, and we've got one of the main guys from the US of A on in the hot seat. Mike from the Gooners Podcast. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing great, man. Good to see you. Good to see you again. Twice in 1 week.
It must be a good thing. It's got to be a good thing, that, Mike.
For me, it is. I don't know how good it is for you, but, it was your decision to have me on, which I appreciate, and I'm loving it. It's Memorial Day here. It's almost 5/20. It's almost 26th of May.
That's right.
So, what better time for us to have a chat?
It's great to have a chat. And listen, a lot of people don't really know the background, how we met and stuff like that. But it was actually after an Arsenal game, wasn't it, when we met?
It was after, I can tell you which game it was. It was Watford.
Watford at home.
On 11 March a couple years ago. It was the day before my birthday. And it was the day that, out of nowhere, Petr Cech actually saved a penalty. So we were all on a high already. And then in comes Kevin Campbell with Lee to the 12 pins, much to all of our delight. So it made a great day even better.
It was a fantastic day, and it was a pleasure to meet you. To be fair, we've been inextricably linked since, haven't we? I've seen you up and down the country, Mike. Let's be honest.
That's right. Yeah, we've seen each other in Liverpool.
You surprised me. Let's be honest.
Outside Goodison, that was hilarious. My buddy Tom, that day, I said, "Watch this. This is either going to be nothing or it's going to be hilarious." And I pushed my way up to the front as you're the speaker of honor before the Everton. Who were they playing? Palace that day.
Palace, yeah.
And I'm like, if he recognizes me, this is gonna be funny because he's not gonna expect to see me here. And that was great. After the game, watching you be adored as you deserve to be by Everton fans. After seeing you that way at Arsenal, it's just nice because you deserve the adulation, and I got to buy you a beer in return for you having bought me a beer the year before, which. First he's buying me beer. Now he's interviewing me. I mean, did I play for Arsenal or what?
Well, listen, you've got that fantastic T-shirt on.
That's right.
That everybody, listen, we're going to try and get that out to everybody because that is such a massive, massive day.
Well, it's a massive, massive shirt too to fit me.
Hey, Mike, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's a massive day for all of us.
I say it all the time.
Yeah, I know you would. I know you say it all the time. But look, I don't want to keep you too long, and I want to get straight into it because we're going to have some fun here, Mike. So let's get going, Mike. How did you become a Gooner, Mike? Tell me your story, how you became a Gooner.
Well, I can already see the eyes rolling into the back of their heads of all my mates that I normally – they hear me say this once a week. But it's a nice story, actually. I was 15 years old, just completely ignorant to cultures other than my own, growing up here just outside of Washington, D.C. And all of a sudden I find out that we're moving to England for what was supposed to be 1 year.
Yeah. And
the plan was we were going to be moving to Cambridge. My stepfather's office was setting up a business over there.
Yeah.
I was going to be joining English school at some point between 5th and 6th form. And I was miserable about it. I just, I didn't know anything. And I think in hindsight, that might have been miserable had that been what happened. But we found out about a week before we went that it was going to be London instead, that I was going to be going to the American high school in London, which kind of made the transition a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So we go there. I spend the first 3 or 4 weeks school started trying to find out how the tube system works, trying to figure out where to play golf because I was really into golf at the time. And there's no golf courses in central London, but you go out to Richmond, there's one. And then there's one by Oakwood, which is up on the Piccadilly line, close to the end. And I lived on the Piccadilly line, so that was the easiest one. And up the way there and the way back, we would pass through Arsenal Tube Station.
Yeah.
And so when the season started and people started talking about going to see the football, I'm like, that's another way I want to kind of get into my new culture that I live in and be part of that. And when choosing a team, the only one I could think of was the one that I kept seeing on the tube, which was Arsenal.
Yeah.
So, friend of mine, we went up, got out of the Gillespie, onto Avenel Road, right onto the North Bank, didn't know anything about it, and watched the game. And probably that season, which happened to be 1988.
Wow.
That season turned out to be a pretty good time to start watching Arsenal.
So when was that first? When was your first Arsenal game? And great that it was at Highbury.
Oh God, yeah.
But was it kind of the start of the season, Mike, or did you give it a little few weeks before you got?
I'm trying to figure. I wish I knew exactly what my first game was. I know that I was at the game that we played against Coventry, which I think was right before Halloween, October of '88. Right. I know I was at that game. Whether that was my first one or whether I'd been a week or two before, I think it was either QPR or Coventry. But we didn't have a lot of home matches at the beginning of that season for whatever reason. So I don't think it was really on my radar yet. But starting in October, it was like a regular occurrence.
Fantastic. So, Mike, you became a Gooner by default by then, I suppose. So, who was your favorite? Who was your favorite player?
Well, despite what most would think, I actually used to be a footballer when I was younger. And I played attacking role. This is why I took such a liking to you. I wish I could say you, but you didn't really break into the team full time until the next year. But it was Merce and Alan Smith. I mean, every single game we went to, they would each get a goal. Yeah. I know that they didn't, but
it felt that way.
Legs of pain. He was finding pockets of space, and the two of them, and they were pulling up trees. It was great. I mean, they were both great. But by the time maybe I had really started to understand the team and the game, because I really didn't know what I was watching too much at the beginning. I was not used to that level of football. But by the time I was done there in my 2 years, David Rocastle was the man. I mean, I just came to appreciate what he was about and the way he played. So, anyone asked me who my favorite was back then, it's Rocky.
Rocky, yeah. Mike, a lot of fans love Rocky, and obviously he's no longer with us, and he meant so much to everybody. I know you've interviewed Michael Thomas, and you've interviewed a few players. You spoke to quite a few players as well, and you've got that understanding of what Rocky meant to the football club. Rocky just seems to be this figure, and was this figure who, you cut him and you could see Arsenal. He bled Arsenal. He was always involved with Arsenal, and it kind of broke everybody's heart when he left the club. What does Rocky mean to you? This isn't a question. This is just me talking to you man to man.
No, I know. I mean, again, there's a difference between what I understood at the time and what I came to understand later. My knowledge about a lot about Arsenal, their history, about the different players, really came from later in life, learning about, reading about, finding out about, and then kind of matching it up with my memories from that time where I was really kind of, just rolling along, having and so I liked Rocastle as a player, but it wasn't until really the last 3 or 4 years where my first game at the Emirates back after many years with my family was against Sunderland, 2013, and it just happened to be Rocky Rocastle Day. It was the first game after the March international break, and everybody's cheering for him, and in the 7th minute, it's just wonderful, and it just brought that all back. And being lucky enough to talk to people like you and Smudge and Perry, and just people who played with him, around him, and got to know him. Alan Smith just couldn't have been more just positively speaking about him as a man. And that is the part that I didn't know, is that he was much better man than he was a footballer, and he was a damn good footballer.
Yeah, he was excellent footballer, but as a person, I tell you, he was like everyone talks about Tony Adams being that leader. Rocky was like a quiet leader. He was like the glue. Rocky was good with all of the squad. He could speak. If on a night out, he'd be here, there, and everywhere because he's having great conversations with everybody. He was such a fantastic man. But the great thing for you, Mike, is you kind of grew up in that George Graham era. Yeah. Growing up and understanding and the success, obviously, the season before you came, we'd won the League Cup.
Yeah.
beating Liverpool. And, the first day he came in, he mentioned about that's the team we want to attack. We want to go for Liverpool. Do you remember, what's your thoughts on the George Graham era?
George Graham, I mean, he clearly had the respect of everybody that he played with. I mean, if Arteta can even come close, I know we'll talk about, I'm assuming we'll talk about him later, but I came in again, not realizing I didn't know him as a player in the 70s. I didn't know we had just, he was a year or two into his stint. Kind of comes, a lot of it's backfilled from later on where, as an adult, you realize how special he was to these players. I mean, again, having talked to the 5 or 6 that I have, almost every single one of them talks about his professionalism and his ability to coach and motivate the team.
Yeah.
Now, 1 or 2 may have fallen out with him later in their career.
We all did. We all did, Mike. Trust me.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate, but it's nice. And I know I haven't so much answered your question, but it was nice seeing him when the film premiered and everybody was kind of rallying together for that he was there, and it seemed, although I wasn't there, like a nice reunion and respectful. And there were 2 things that blew me away after I came back to the States, and it was harder to follow Arsenal for a while. Michael Thomas leaving for Liverpool, and George Graham ending up the way that he did with Arsenal and going to Spurs. But I mean, that era, it was a golden age, and for people who only became Arsenal supporters during Arsene Wenger, I mean, you can't help that. There's not anything wrong with that, but I think there's just such a different mindset from people who have only known the one manager until recently. George Graham deserves every bit of respect that I think he's missing in a lot of quarters amongst Arsenal supporters and amongst the team itself.
Do you think he's undervalued, George Graham? I particularly do.
Undervalued? Absolutely. I mean, I was telling someone the other day that because they were tweeting something about, most overrated or underrated. I generally can't stand that concept because you have to understand how he was rated in order to and agree on that before you can say overrated, underrated. But George Graham, when it comes to, to people who talk about managers of all time with Arsenal, I don't see how you can differentiate Herb Chapman, George Graham, and Arsene Wenger, and all for different reasons.
Yeah.
What they brought to the club, the innovations on all of their part. But, George Graham building a club basically from scratch, doing the unpopular things when it came to personnel, and trusting the youth. Now, it's a different age. If there had been superstar French and Italian players and Spanish players who were pushing for moves to the first division back in the 80s on a regular basis, it might have been a different game, but not everybody was buying players from Colchester and Stoke and bringing 2/3 of the team through the youth and reserve squad like he did. And he made.
Mike, you're right. I think what he done with matching everybody together and utilizing that youth system was sensational. And to be successful and to take on that dominating Liverpool team, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves at all. I think he's so undervalued by Arsenal. And because I suppose it's a different era, as you said, there's people who only know Arsene Wenger. But part of being an Arsenal fan and having that class is understanding the past and understanding who built those foundations. And George Graham definitely built those foundations.
My first Arsenal game back, the one I took with my family, the first time I'd been in the Emirates, our seats were, as they often are, if you get seats through Arsenal America, it's a nice view from the clock end upper.
Yeah.
And there's an area in the clock end upper where they have a photo gallery of all of the managers that are there. And of course, at that time it ended with Arsene Wenger. And I just made a beeline for the George Graham one and took a selfie next to it, just to kind of commemorate those eras because that's how much he meant to me.
Yeah, mark of respect. So Mike, here's a question for you, my friend. So you obviously, did you see or listen to the game in '89? And if you watched it, where did you watch it?
Man, I remember this very, as you might imagine. So I don't have the Amanda story.
No, I don't want that. I want your perspective.
No,
This is
exactly.
so important.
Mine was a little different. But yeah, again, at the time, I think we had school that day. It was May. Our school went to early June. I was 16 barely, and I hadn't been to an away game. I ended up, I think, going to 1 or 2 games away from home the following year before I left. But I just didn't. I wasn't involved with the away scheme. Didn't know how to do it. Couldn't get a ticket. Wasn't really looking for one. Wasn't too optimistic we were going to win. But sure as hell we're going to watch the game. So a bunch of us from school, we got together. We went to a pub where we frequently went to. It was called the British Flag, just outside of Regent's Park, because we lived and went to school in St. John's Wood, which
Nice,
we're posh, but that's where the company put us. So and that pub has been gone for a long time, but it was a great pub with a pool table, a little TV in the corner, and a jukebox where some guy kept playing Ferry Cross the Mersey all night, and it was just there were fights getting ready to begin. That night. I don't actually mind that song that much, but that was not the night for it.
No.
So yeah, we watched that game from a pub in London. 16 years old. I was in some sort of like tiff with the girl that I was seeing at the time, and so a lot of the game I think I spent on a couch, like away from the TV, arguing with her. But at some point, it was like, this is going to have to wait.
I like that. You wait there. Let me watch the football.
It kind of worked out pretty well that the first half was maybe a little boring by design, like by strategy, because had that been exciting, I would have been off at the side a little bit. But when the second half whistle started, I was planted in front of that television.
Okay, Mike. So when Alan Smith scored, did the pub erupt?
The pub went nuts. There was still a lot of nerves around. I just walked around and said, you know what? In 30 years, I'm going to be talking to this guy about this goal. Just watch me. No, I just pace. Even back then, I would pace. Pace back and forth when you're nervous. Can't sit down.
Yeah.
To this day, I'll watch an Arsenal game against Norwich on the TV at our local pub, and everyone knows that the seat that I've been sitting in to like reserve a good spot is available because I have to stand up and pace around. So yeah, I mean, that goal kind of kept us into it, and my eyes were glued to the TV until the end, and then we all know.
Well, hold on. I want to get to one little spot before that, where Michael Thomas has that chance. Kevin Richardson plays him in the box, and he has that chance. Did you think that was the? I don't remember that happening other than watching the movie. I blocked that out of my mind. Like, I can't honestly sit here and tell you that in 1989 I remember seeing that and having an emotional feeling about it, because I think I was just too frazzled. It was too long ago. Obviously I could say now that when I watch it back, it's a guilt-edged chance. Yeah.
But it's easy now to not be worried about it because we all know what happened after that. So
okay, Mike, talk me through. This is really important. Talk me through.
You're gonna make me cry now.
No, I know. Listen, talk me through on the night. The move and the goal, and talk me through when you watch it now, because I still get emotional. I still feel, I still get up. It's just inbuilt in me how I feel when I watch that. How do you feel? How did you feel on the night, and how do you feel watching it back?
I mean, the only thing I remember about that night and that goal was seeing the goal go in and immediately ending up at the bottom of a 15-person dog pile. I mean, I had my face down on the floor of a pub on a Friday evening about 10 o'clock, and covered by like literally a metric ton worth of people, and I didn't care at all about the germs or about any of that stuff.
You were happy.
Oh my God, it was the greatest. I just, how I didn't end up with some sort of infection that night was would have made COVID look like a joke. But the moment was incredible. I honestly think there was a little too much drink for me to have like a sharp memory of what had happened after that, how we celebrated. The one thing I can tell you I do regret and will always regret is not heading straight up to Highbury. It it didn't occur to us. Again, this was all brand new. We didn't immediately think flock to the stadium, and I probably would have gotten in a heck of a lot of trouble with my mom, because I think I had a curfew back at that time. I was 16 years old. I think I had to be home by 11 normally, but 11:30 that night. So
right.
But one of the greatest things about Lee and Amy Lawrence putting together that movie is Fever Pitch was great.
Yeah.
I enjoyed watching Fever Pitch, made my kids watch it over and over and over again. But when that movie came out, that was just literally about that game and that season, it just was such a great watch. And I mean, I get tingly every single time I watch it now. I can watch it 10 times in a row, and I'm still like really concerned that Dixon's going to kick the ball out the side, instead of finding Smith perfectly. And having him tell us what he was thinking at the time, and knowing we've talked to Dixon, Smith, and Thomas now, and it just makes it so much more special to watch that and just know kind of what was in the mind of the people doing that. But my favorite parts of that whole play though come down to Barnes and who was it?
Richardson.
Was it Aldridge? No, Aldridge.
Oh yeah, John Aldridge. Yeah.
Almost puts this. And this was something I never saw it until it was explained to me.
Yeah.
I think Lee Dixon said, Aldridge put his arm up like he was just going to bat the ball down, take a red card, and kill the game off. And he pulled it back right as Lukic was getting ready to throw it. And I love watching that now. It's just you don't expect a team like that to make those kinds of mistakes.
No, I know it's what a special night. So when you watch it now, Mike, like I say, you get those feelings, don't you? They come flooding back.
Absolutely. I find myself walking around. Like, again, I can't just sit on the couch and watch it. I pop up and I'm pacing around, and it is the most incredible sporting moment. I have to put that sporting in there because my family gets mad if I say it's the most incredible moment, but most incredible sporting moment of my life, before, then, or after. I mean, I've seen some local teams win championships here in the States. That's been great. Yeah. It doesn't happen often enough, but that was the one for me. I've got the picture up in my room. I've got the movies on constant play, and and then of course the shirts to remind me. Yeah.
So Mike, you came through in my era, really. I was a young player coming through.
I was in attendance for your first goal.
Well, there you go. You was in the North Bank, right?
I was in the North Bank in our normal place, which is facing the goal from the North Bank. I was on the left side, about a third of the way up. And honestly, the Highbury experience involved, for me, it didn't involve going to pubs nearby and then coming to the game, because pubs were hit or miss as to whether a 16-year-old could really get along in the pubs and be served and all that. So what we would do is get off the tube. Well, we would locally, where we live, we would go to an off license or something, pick up a pint or something like that of some cheap liquor like scotch or whiskey or vodka or something like that. It's disgusting to think about now, but we would go there because that would just fit in our pants nice and easy.
Yeah.
Go through the turnstiles or the stalls into the North Bank, claim a spot because we wanted that same spot.
Yeah.
And just, drink and chase, and then read the
program.
The program. And I've saved, I wish I had all of them, but I've saved about 10 of them. And I have some special ones I was looking through. But every single program that first season, when you get to the youth part, when you get to the reserve part, and even most of all in George Graham's page-long
his
feature.
His feature.
Week.
Yeah.
It was constantly Kevin Campbell. He's going to come through. He's going to be big for us. And Campbell scores a goal in the reserve winner. We win 1-0. It was just there were some names that you definitely knew were coming up. Kwame Ampadu, for some reason, was the other one. I think I just liked his name a lot. But you were the two that I was rooting for once I was aware of how the whole structure worked. And the next season you came good. And I remember you scoring and rolling off to the side, and I think you attacked a steward or something like that.
Yeah, it was to you, probably to
To the
your right.
other side of the ball.
Yeah, because you were that side, wasn't you? Looking at the North Bank here.
Yeah, so I wasn't like staring down on you from 15 feet. It was on the other side. And
Yeah.
of course, I've watched the video as well because I wanted to recreate that goal when I was at Highbury.
Yeah, I love that, Mike.
But, yeah.
So did you feel more of a connection to the players in the Highbury era than you do now?
I mean, how could you not? I mean, you could get a connection to the players. I feel more of a connection to those players now though than I did back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, players now are mostly brands. They're like Ozil Incorporated or Jaka LLC. I mean, it's just and they use social media as a way to engage but promote themselves as well.
Yeah.
None of that back in the 80s. The way that those players learned to engage with their supporters was by going into them.
Yes.
On the North Bank. Maybe. I'm sure they were easier to spot around town at pubs, or if you had gone out on a Tuesday night someplace, maybe you would have run into a few. But if you knew where to go, but yeah, I mean, there was just a tighter connection. You felt the players were younger. I mean, there was so many people, 18 to 21 on that team,
on that squad, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was just you felt like literally when you walk into Highbury, you're connected to the players by all the people in the stands between you and the players. It's just like a link to the players. Whereas now you're kind of, you're having to watch them from afar. Even if you're not physically that far from them, you're in a whole different plane of living from where they are.
Yeah, that Ryan Fletcher said that. He said, that connection just isn't there. He said the Emirates is a lovely stadium, but it's too far. It's not like Highbury where you're kind of touching distance. You feel like you could feel them.
Yeah,
on the pitch.
It's literally like electricity that's conducive through through steel or something like that. Just the energy would literally radiate from the players on the pitch, through the grass, to the person in the first row, the second row, through the barriers that you would lean on.
Yeah.
In the terraces, because it broke my heart when I saw. I mean, I know why, and obviously I'm not complaining, but when I saw videos and pictures of Highbury with seats on the North Bank, it had to happen based on the government laws at the time. And believe me, I was there the day of Hillsborough as well, the Newcastle United game. I understand why it had to happen, but it just, to me, I felt like that might change Highbury for people. But apparently it didn't lose that fever, that atmosphere that it always had. And then all of a sudden it was gone.
I know it's very difficult. I still feel, look, when we left Highbury, and I know they sold us a dream, Mike, didn't they? They sold us a dream about moving to the Emirates. We're doing it to compete at the very top. We already had a team that was competing at the very top.
Well, I think they thought that they saw the way that football was going. And in fact, in some ways they were right about that. But that with the game day revenue from a Highbury, with the promotional rights from a Highbury, that we were not going to be able to compete with teams that were doing what Manchester City was about to do at the time. And so I think there was some foresight combined with bad timing, combined with poor execution. And, so I kind of pushed back a little bit at this we never should have left Highbury thing, because, what would separate us from a Watford at that point, other than our history and I'm just talking fundamentally and financially. I have concerns that we would have lagged behind, because there's only so much you could do in a Highbury. Now, maybe we could have redone Highbury. We could have made it more advanced without losing the community atmosphere. I don't know the logistics behind that. I'm not on the Islington Town Council, so I don't know what could have happened. But yeah, I mean, the soul of the team got left there. The soul of the club got left there, and we got to get it back.
So, well, my argument to what you just said, Mike, is fair enough. We moved to the Emirates, and there's more revenue. I totally get that. But as a team and as a squad and as a club, the club's going to be there We know that it's the Arsenal. But we stopped competing. We went from a big, strong physical side to a small, softer side who got bullied. And we have never had that back. But I believe the current incumbent, the current manager, could get us there. But we're going to speak about that, aren't we? We're going to speak about that.
Yeah, what the reason I say bad timing, and I don't want to turn this into a financial analysis show, but you know, the world was kind of in bad shape around 2007, 2008. It was, as it turned out, a pretty bad time to have a lot of debt and to be trying to run a self-sustaining model. And unfortunately, we also had 4 different owners at the time, not just one. And it's just, it was bad timing. We had to try to get by just the skin of our teeth. And I mean, it actually adds some fuel to the fact that what Arsene Wenger did during those years with what he had.
Oh yeah,
was impressive in hindsight. It wasn't what we were promised. It wasn't what we had experienced in the 10 years prior to leaving Highbury. But he kept things together, I think, with bandages and tape, and I'm not sure another manager could have done that. But it was just really a bad time to be taking on debt and having to go through an austerity period, because it was exactly when other clubs started to really, pour money into players, and we just weren't able to / wouldn't. But I don't know that means it was a bad idea to try to kind of get into that new stage. But again, the most important thing that you can say going back is that we certainly left our soul there.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the team. That's what makes the club.
Yeah. So, Mike, Arsene Wenger had incredible success at the Arsenal. What's your favorite moment of his success?
Well, you want to talk about financial. Buying high and selling low is exactly what I did with the Arsenal, because when I moved back to the States in 1990, it was extremely difficult at that point to follow the club on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah.
You could get results in the newspaper that were, from a Saturday game that were posted on a Tuesday, just to score. That's it. It was very, very difficult. And between that and then going off to college, university in the mid-90s, then very quickly starting a family, I just went through kind of phases in my life where sports in general, but Arsenal, because it was impossible, it was kind of off my radar. I hate this about my history with Arsenal. I mean, I say I've been an Arsenal fan for 31 years, but there's about 15 of those that go missing in the middle. And unfortunately, those include the first 10 of Arsene Wenger's reign at Arsenal.
Well, you're taking care of business. That's what you're doing, aren't you? You're having to take care of your business.
Well, and had that been at a different time with more social media and more international stuff, I could have done both. But
yeah,
I know people who were playing video games and became aware of Arsenal in the 90s. People, that was just never my thing. I know people who were being sent videotapes from their family in various countries across the world of Arsenal, watching them. I just really that never happened for me. So, unfortunately, my first game of just kind of coming back into the Arsenal and the Arsene Wenger era was the Champions League final in 2006, which I stupidly watched. I watched it yesterday. I made my son watch it, and it was just that much more painful. But a couple of my friends from work were like, "We're going to take the afternoon off, go watch the Champions League final." And I'm like, "Oh, who's playing?" Barcelona and Arsenal. I'm like, "Okay, well, I got to watch this."
Yeah.
And from that point on, that game, I felt the disappointment and the frustration. It was all coming back. Then that summer was the World Cup, and I kept watching Thomas Rosicky, this new player that we had just signed, tearing it up for the Czech Republic. And then I just started watching again in the fall, because it was finally every game would be on television. So I missed Bergkamp, I missed Vieira, I missed most of Thierry Henry, I missed the doubles. I missed France winning the World Cup. I missed it all, and it makes me sick. But from a firsthand perspective, the highlight of the entire Arsene Wenger thing obviously has to be the first FA Cup win, because we never thought we'd win another trophy, first of all, And well, some of us were starting to suspect that. And number two, the way that game went was just, it was torture ending in glory. And that's kind of the Arsenal way.
Take you on the roller coaster, right? Right.
Nothing straightforward. I mean, to win the FA Cup 4-0 the next year was kind of unexpected because it was like never in doubt. But the one against Hull, man, that you just kind of felt, we had watched the League Cup against Birmingham a few years before that, the disastrous Koscielny and Szczesny thing, and I'm thinking this is just never going to happen. And here we go down 2-0 in the first 30 minutes against Hull, and I mean, I thought my head was going to be.
Was you watching it in Washington?
No,
did you travel?
I had watched the whole season in Washington. That was my first season going to the pub, meeting new people, realizing there were other Arsenal supporters out there. And then I had a business trip in Napa Valley in California that started the day of the FA Cup final.
Right.
So we flew into San Francisco, spent the night, got up at 6:30 in the morning in San Francisco and went to the pub there, Maggie McGarry's. They have a great supporters group there. And watched that game with my wife and a bunch of strangers who were no longer strangers after the game.
Yeah, sure.
And when that goal went in, literally, you know about when you're on the terraces and the goal goes in and you're 20 feet away from where you started.
Yeah,
that happened at the pub.
At the pub.
And I don't remember what time the game. I think the game started at 9:30 Pacific, which is nice and late for a game in Pacific time.
Yeah.
And by 11:30 it was crazy, and I think I had like a 3:00 bus to the work conference that we had, and I was just gone at that point. I was still in my shirt and smiling ear to ear. I may have had a few drinks. It was just it was great, wonderful day.
Fantastic, right? Fantastic. So, how do your trips to the Emirates differ from going to Highbury now? Because I know you do certain trips, certain parts of the year to the Emirates. How does your trips differ from obviously going to Highbury? Well, the feeling and stuff like that.
Well, the Highbury trips, it was interesting. The Highbury trips were more about just me and a friend going to the game and experiencing it and just being part of it. Yeah. Hearing the chanting kind of cascading like a wave from the back of the North Bank, and always wondering like who starts that.
Yeah.
And how do they know it's going to get picked up by like the whole concept was foreign to me, and I just loved it. I like new things that you have to adjust to, like the phrase. I just love that, and so that was. I mean, I felt like I had found a new home there, but it wasn't really a super social event. We didn't necessarily get to know people around us in the North Bank. Ironically enough, I know people who were probably 20 or 30 feet away from me in the North Bank. Know them now, but so that was one kind of experience. But we would get there early, savor it, enjoy it, and just sink it in. We go to the Emirates now, and I'm fortunate enough to have gone more than a dozen times to the Emirates now. So I mean, I don't want to act like it's routine, because for so many of us in the States that come over, it's something you plan your year around. It's a highlight, and it is going to see the Arsenal. But the day for me is more about being at the pub before and after, seeing friends like Kevin and all of our other mates that go to the pub, and experiencing the culture of a football day. And unfortunately, and I think this has a lot to do with the stadium and the current environment of the fans in the stadium, it's a transactional thing going to the stadium. You get there in time so that you can get through the lines and be up in your seats or out into your seats and split up with all your friends who have seats in different areas, and just get there by kickoff. And then after the game, you wait in line, you leave, and you get back to the pub and try to get a good spot. So, the game, unfortunately, is the reason you go, but the people and the companionship and the before and the after is the reason you keep coming back.
Right. Yeah, that's a great answer. That is a great answer.
It's unfortunate because it feels cold and large. I don't have a sense of what different parts of the stadium are like, because I've generally only been clock end upper and most recently, thanks to our friend Jack, been able to be West Stand lower, right behind the dugouts a couple of times, and that's an amazing view. But yeah, it's just not the same. But I'm going to keep coming as long as I'm invited and as long as they have fans back at the game.
Mike, here's a quick one. I just want to add on to that. Would you be a component for safe standing?
100%. And I know that it's something that's been discussed between the clubs and the supporters groups and liaisons about safety certificates and the counts. I mean, there's a lot of mumbo jumbo about why it can't happen. I just think that it needs to. I mean, I've sat in the safe standing at Dortmund. I didn't even realize that's what it was at the time. I just thought they were neat kind of seats that I didn't have to sit in. It didn't strike me that that's what safe standing is at the time, but it just, I mean, I think it needs to happen, make the whole of the North Bank safe standing.
Yeah.
Whatever you have to, I mean, it might take a year to readjust, and you might have a few season ticket holders who
have to move.
happy about
you have
it,
to move, yeah.
But someone who sat in the North Bank in a seat for, since 2008, or I'm sorry, since 1998 or whenever the seating started at Highbury, and they don't want to have to stand up, which in some cases you can't. I mean, I get that, but you gotta do something to make Highbury or to make Emirates into a stronger home pitch advantage, because right now it's just, I mean, you try to start a song at Highbury and mostly, unless there's something like a goal that's just happened, you stand around and people are looking at you like, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
That's not, I'm not having that.
Mike, what was it like at the safe standing at Dortmund?
It was brilliant. I had a chance to go to a game. I was in Berlin after one of my London trips watching my son play. Yeah. He was on an international trip playing football against teams from Austria and Germany and Czech Republic. And one of the days was an off day. We weren't allowed to hang out with them when they weren't playing because it was this whole team structure thing. So I had a free day. There was a game in Dortmund. I hopped on a train. I bought a ticket the last minute. Made sure it was on the yellow wall because I'd seen it, heard about it, and it was phenomenal. Ironically, that day, Dortmund won 3-1, and 2 of the goals were scored by Aubameyang and Socrates.
Right, okay.
It felt like an Arsenal game, even though I didn't know it yet.
You didn't know it at the time, yeah.
They were playing Frankfurt, and it was a 3-1 win. I think Royce scored, and then those 2. Socrates was a bomb, too. I have a video of it that I took, like real time, not knowing that he was about to do it. But the atmosphere, it was just fantastic. It's loud. It's, this was just a regular league game against Frankfurt. I can only imagine for Champions League what it's like. You see it on TV, but it's just, it's an example of an environment that they've done a lot of winning lately. And for some reason they have just this absolutely machine-like transfer policy. I mean, how you get Holland in for, I'm getting off topic, but like they just keep doing that. So the success breeds success, but they're not title winners all the time. No. They're often second fiddle to Bayern, but their atmosphere is just tremendous. And
in the seating, it's very safe, isn't it, Mike?
Oh, I mean, I felt completely safe. And in fact, at one point I was taking a video with my phone, and we Dortmund scores, and my phone went shooting out of my hand, and I'm thinking, I'm not getting my train ticket on my phone. I'm not going to be able to get back to Berlin, much less anything else. And so, for about 2 minutes after the goal, I go a few rows down. I'm looking for it. Someone like taps me on the shoulder. They found my phone. I got lucky, but because someone will nick your phone. I mean, I had my phone nicked at the 12 pins last time I was there a couple months ago. So, you never know where you're safe or not. But it was safe. No pushing after a goal. You didn't do the crowd surfing thing. And as fun as that is, I don't think safety people would be having that these days.
No.
So, I'm willing to let that go if I can at least stand up. I've stood up in the last row of the Emirates for a game about 4 years ago, the very last row of clock end upper with the wire behind me and been told to sit down by the stewards. And they were like, it's not our rules.
Yeah.
We there's no one behind you, but we can't, and that says it all right there.
Yeah, it does need safe standing.
I
It
thought
does
that was
need
the one
safe
place
standing.
I could safely stand and not be bothering anybody, and the stewards wouldn't let me. So
Yeah, they're doing, although they're doing their job, Mike, they have to tell you. Okay, what's your thoughts on the current incumbent manager at the Arsenal, Mikel Arteta? What's your thoughts?
he's got a little bit of the George Graham in him, I think. He like George Graham, he played for the club under a pretty good manager.
Yeah.
I think he played under Bertie Mee.
Who? George?
Did George play when was Bertie Mee still the manager?
Yeah.
I mean, he understood the club. Wasn't necessarily the star player, but he was a very, very good player, and kind of went out and experienced and sowed his oats with other clubs and managed Millwall and came back. And in the case of Arteta, how good of an apprenticeship can you have being under Pep Guardiola? And the whole lack of experience thing. I was nervous. I mean, I'm not going to roll back the clock and say that, I was supporting him to be the manager and, right after Arsene Wenger got sacked. In fact, I was thrilled when I found out that we got someone with some experience instead of going cheap and grabbing Arteta back. That worked out pretty badly, as it turned out. You never have the man after the man really step up and be another legend. I mean, we've seen it at Liverpool. It took 3 or 4 different guys to come in and try it. Including Kenny Dalglish, I believe.
Yeah.
It took. United are still looking. It's very hard to replace a legend with somebody who's going to just pick up and get things back to where they need to be, and we're no different. But he's got respect for the club. He came right out and appealed to the fans, which was smart.
Yes.
I had people telling me, because I slept through it, but his first video conference. People were like, I'm in. Like if he's even close to what he's just said,
yeah,
I think we're in the right direction. And it's unfortunate that we didn't get to see the rest of the season play out the way it probably could have. Whether we end up seeing it or not is another story. But his imprint on the team, I think, is going to be long lasting. And people say our squad isn't good enough, and that may be true. People say we need to invest and get some of the dead weight out of there. That may be true, but we may also have players who legitimately were as good as, the Dixons and the Winterburns and the Thomases and the Kevin Campbells that have just not been coached properly for many years. And I'm not just talking about Unai Emery. I'm talking about the last 4 or 5 years of Arsene Wenger as well.
Yeah.
And, we don't know what we have. We just know that it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And, I think when you start to see the performance of Mustafi and Xhaka and a couple other people under Mikel Arteta who are buying in and ready to just lay themselves down for their manager, we might actually see that our team isn't that bad after all. And maybe we don't need 9 new guys. We just need 2 or 3. And we can get back to where we need to be.
Well, I like Arteta. I think he's a breath of fresh air for the football club. And I think the name on the back of the shirt isn't going to be that important. I think what's actually in the shirt is going to be more important, and we work as a team, Mike. So, Mike, could you believe it? We're already at the last question here. It's flown by. So if there were 3 things, Mike, you could change at the Arsenal to improve the football club, 3 things, what would they be?
This is a tough one. I know why you end with this. But none of them will have to do with transfers. The first, I would say, goes back to what I was saying before, the atmosphere at the Emirates. I mean, it needs to be addressed. I keep hearing snippets about, how they want to try to address it. There's Red Action, there's the supporters groups and the fan liaisons, and it just seems like treading water in a lot of cases. Nothing seems to happen, but there has to be an atmosphere there that is somewhere where you don't want to come to play if you're an opposing player. I'm not exactly sure the best way to do that. Possibly not taking the piss out of these Ashburn Army guys who are trying at least to do something. Not taking the piss and trying to undermine from within as a fan base might be a good start, but the club needs to pour more into that as well. So that would be one thing to change. Not exactly, I don't have the recipe to change it though.
Yeah.
The second is I'd like to see and hear a lot more from Josh Kroenke. People talk about Stan Kroenke all they want. Stan Kroenke is irrelevant to me. He owns the club, but he's proven he doesn't care about Arsenal. We know that. He's proven he feels that Arsenal is a business. We know that.
Yeah.
That is the legitimate truth. Josh, some people think I'm bought in. We got a chance to interview him in a very exclusive group in Denver last year.
Yeah.
Sat and watched him with unprepared stuff, answering questions and, really searching for the right words. And you could, he's a bit of a professional. He knows what he's doing in a room.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw some legitimate care there. I know he wants to win, but you have to be more connected. Not just going to the games and sitting in the director's box. You have to come out and talk more. You have to leak comments that are going to give the club hope. You can't just say, buckle in and enjoy yourself or whatever he said, get excited.
Yeah.
You have to follow that up throughout the season and show that you care.
Yeah.
And, I've seen glimpses of that, but not enough. So I think, you need transparency. You need to, you don't have to have a raging lifelong fan be the supporter of the club. Isn't Mike Ashley a lifelong fan of Newcastle? I don't know if I've got that right or not, but
whether he's a lifelong fan or not, I think he's just sold it. So there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, he may now be the most popular man in Newcastle for selling the team, but my impression was he was a fan who got rich. He bought his beloved club and drove him into the ground because he's just an idiot. And so, it just goes to show you don't need, Liverpool isn't owned by lifelong Liverpool supporters. They're owned by people very much like the Kroenkes, but with better decision-making history over the last 10 years. Chelsea's a different story, but so you don't need that, but you do need someone who cares and is present and transparent. And I think Josh can be that person. He just needs to kind of release the strings and maybe focus a little bit more on it. So that's the second thing. And the third is us foreign fans have been embraced by the club in ways that I never thought possible. We've had more interaction with players and coaches and opportunities in American tours 3 times in the last 6 years. They've gone to the Far East, to Southeast Asia. The foreign fan is very included right now with Arsenal. And the reasons why. It's building a global brand. But I do feel, and I hear this a lot from people we know, and I can see it, they seem to be forgetting the everyday match day going supporter, the people who go home and away, the people who support the club day in, day out, because they're lucky enough to be there. It's a geography thing.
Yeah.
They're not better fans. They're not worse fans. There's no proper. There's no non-proper. But they're just kind of taken for granted, I think. And again, I don't know the answer to this, but I think you have to do more for the people who literally, and your best friend and one of mine. He so much of his life is Arsenal.
Yeah.
And it's so much, it's that way for so many of the people that we know. And it'd just be nice to make them feel more valued, whether it's ticket prices, somehow being cut, short-term monetary loss for long-term loyalty and gain, whether it's subsidizing, away travel more than they already do and more than they're required to by the league. Something needs to be done to make the match day fan go inclusive, because as they bring in more tourists, as people like to say, it just alienates further the people who've given their life and decades of their life to the Arsenal. And I honestly think, not being part of that group, I think that group is underserved and needs to be made a little bit more important by the club.
Mike, I think that's a great point. And with the current economic circumstances, etc., and obviously we're hoping that the season can be finished. Obviously, it's going to be behind closed doors. That might be the catalyst for the football clubs to actually realize, you know what, this football is nothing without these fans. The fans should be held to such a high regard by the football clubs, especially after these games finish, because without them, it's never going to be the same, Mike.
Yeah, the ones that we've seen played behind closed doors the last couple of weeks, the football is okay. the atmosphere is just not. It's
drab, isn't it? It's drab.
Not there.
Yeah.
Piping crowd noise, and that's even more insulting. It's just you need the fans, and not just for the noise they make during the games.
Definitely.
You need them before, after. You need them talking and embracing the team and loving it and talking about their interactions with the club, and I really hope that Arsenal, among all of the clubs that are out there, recognize that and really put on a full court press, to use a American term, to try to get fans back, and not just back in their seats, but back in their hearts.
100%.
100%,
Mike. 100%. Mike, look, I've got one more question for you to ask, and it might make you smile. What is your favorite restaurant? I've been asked to ask you.
What's my favorite restaurant?
Yeah, what's your favorite restaurant?
Is that Lee that asked you to ask me?
Who? Who do you reckon asked?
Is he bald and old?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's a female.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, she wants me to say TGI Fridays in Stratford.
That's what she wants you to say. That's
a very high class restaurant I was taken to one time. Was that meal fantastic?
Did she take you there?
We met up there one time. It wasn't a date.
No, I'm saying, did she take you there? That's nice. She's taking me nowhere, that one.
I thought she was taking me to a nice restaurant. And she's like, yeah, there's this. Oh, she goes, I can't do the accent, but she's like, oh, I love Fridays. It's fantastic. And I'm thinking, like, is Fridays over there nicer than it is here? Because it's literally your last choice that you would go to here. No. And I'm like, maybe it's just like a different culture, because no, I think we went there. I think the table wasn't clean. We had to wait like an hour to get a drink. It was the company was good.
Oh dear.
We talked some smack about some people, but yeah, that's definitely my favorite. It's not it's not going to be the Savoy Grill. That one sucks. It's definitely TGI Fridays.
TGI Fridays. Mike, listen, I can't thank you enough for coming on, my friend, and hopefully we can do this again for part 2 in the not too distant future.
I would love to. And Kevin, I know I've told you this, but I mean, the thing you're doing, I watched your interview with Tiffany, loved it. What you're doing for supporters and like I've said, flipping the script to make supporters and fans the focus is unique. I can't imagine, and I know you're doing this independent of Arsenal. This is your thing. This isn't something Arsenal's doing, and it's important to point that out. But I can't imagine players and legends from other clubs, just taking an interest in the supporters the way that you have. And I think you're starting something that hopefully will lead to something else. And it couldn't be more pleasurable to know you and to be able to, chat with you and banter with you a little bit. And this has been a lot of fun.
No, Mike, listen, it's a pleasure. And if you remember pre-season, the We Care Do You, this was about everyone connecting together. We've seen a lot of the toxicity go away. We've seen the club kind of get on not a great footing, but it's a more solid footing with Mikel Arteta in place. And, this happened, and it's given me the opportunity now to be able to do what I said I would do, is to really reach out to the fans, because I value the fans so much, because I'm a fan again. I'm back being a fan. So, I look at it through different glasses, which is great. But I think more should be put on the fans, and the fans should be made, held in such high esteem. So for me, it's an absolute pleasure.
You're practicing what you preach. Keep it up, brother.
Yeah, I will do. Mike, thank you so much, mate. And you take care. Speak to you soon.
Thank you very much. Happy 89th anniversary.
That's right. Take care, Mike.